Dzień dobry, słychać mnie, tak?
Hello, can you hear me?
Dobrze.
Yeah.
Bardzo miło, dziękuję za
I'm really
zaproszenie.
glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I don't have much time, so I will try to start without further ado.
W związku z tym, że mam znakomitych
So, because I have really great listeners who really know agriculture much better than me, which is quite obvious,
to pozwolę sobie
I will allow myself
pozornie uciec
to, in a way, move away from answering all those questions and about the challenges of agriculture in the 21st century by paraphrasing of Colin Gray, who said that strategy is in asking questions and not giving answers. So, in this formula, I will hold this this meeting today for the next half an hour, because the future of agriculture really brings questions above all. I know from experience that asking the right questions leads us with time to the right answers or to the right path. Let me start with a very rudimentary description. Three phases of development of agriculture, which we know, and some of you may even remember them, because it's a first set matrix upon which we overimpose what happened in Poland, how the world behaves, or even from our work in agriculture. So the traditional farming, which we still remember, was really like a horticulture. In a way, it's a manual work. An individual person with a manual work tended to his crops and his animals. It was very capital intensive and very human labor intensive. And this is a traditional agriculture we know from literature. This sort of it is moving away into the past. It did not generate enough wealth, so we had later said everybody was then charmed by the development of industrial agriculture with pesticides, with tractors, with huge machinery, a very intensive farming. And this is an agriculture which generated a certain capital surplus. For example, the Soviet Union was, due to its industrialization of agriculture, managed to sort of lead on this way. The same with China and in other parts of the world, but this led to huge social changes, to a food surplus, without even thinking about the quality of this food. It brought us to the world, which for a citizen of a city, an urban guy like I am, this is like a default image of agriculture. You have like big land, we've got a tractor, we sow, we reap, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, if we get a bit deeper, especially if we start to understand what is the backbone of geopolitics, which is the value chains, we will understand that all this agriculture, all this modern agriculture, in this average understanding, is based on the supply chain, the producers, foodstuffs, forcing farmers to take decisions like when we reap, when we sow, etc., etc. It's becoming more and more global, or at least regional. Big monopolies are sort of taking over. So at the end, this product, in an increasingly mass way, will give you a better return on investment to bigger corporations, so that the consumers could have cheap food. And this is a trend we have known for several years. Why am I talking so much about that? Because that was possible. And these tendencies were outlined because the world not only made an industrial revolution, came up with tractors, invented combines, etc., or huge harvesters, but also because the world shared work. After 1991, we could see a global system was born for sharing of work and of products, and Poland was also included in that trend. Before 1989, our agricultural production was different, and starting from 1990s, especially after we joined the European Union, we saw the regionalization, the globalization. It started to look totally different. It was subject to big regulations, big mega trends related to how it should look like. This all was a result of the fact that geopolitically Americans were ruling the world, together with the West. they set the rules for the game. Where's the farmer? Where he isn't? How we manage with that, and how the global supply chain looks like. Big international capital appeared in Poland. Big concerns, big companies that were the suppliers of technologies and methods and the rules for agriculture. They ruled the scene, so that they could also control and oversee the work of the Polish farmer and the Polish agriculture. Why am I talking about that? Possibly also that's why I got invited here, because right now we're in a turning point. The system of a global openness, global sharing, when it appeared that once we get to a certain level of quality at a certain price, we will find our consumer everywhere, but we will also a consumer of the global supply chain, of the value division, etc., and the rules that govern it. Especially it was true on the European level, but this is starting to break down. We can see cracks, not because agriculture became wrong or bad, but because of the change in geopolitics, the rivalry between China and the United States, and this rivalry increasingly brings consequences which also afflict the agriculture. The global value chain is breaking down. So maybe the farmers in Poland also experience negative consequences of such a phenomenon. The Chinese, as we know, most of the Chinese in the world, at least, and they really like to eat. They would really want to import food from Poland. With the right policy of the Polish government, this could be a very profitable business. But for many reasons, this is not a large-scale thing in Poland, because for geopolitical reasons. Who we ally with, who we work with, what are the pressures on our decision makers, what is the problem of getting our products on the Chinese table. There's also a second tendency related to the fact that in Europe and everywhere else we can see the ecological farming, the sustainable farming. This can also be related to the digital revolution that is taking place right now, consisting in that with the right capital investment and organizational investment, a farmer would be able to individually treat each plant with new technologies, digital maps of his plantations, of his fields, etc. Individually approach his plantations, individually approach to his livestock and all the products of their farm, but that would require a lot of investment and understanding what digital farming is about, which again can make a quantum leap in the farm production. In a way, we could say that the fertilizers, at the cost of course of ecology and sustainability, made a quantum leap in the productivity of farming. Also, the digitalization can make a huge quantum leap and change the status of agriculture in the society and how the agriculture is perceived in the society. The biggest motor for change, the biggest driver for change and uncertainty is the change itself, the one that takes place causing other changes. That's why I started my lecture from stating that there are only questions. Because first, how would EU behave from the point of view of digital revolution? We are a part of EU, of course, and the division of the world in the new spheres, maybe, which trade only within themselves. In which part of the world Poland will be? What our decision makers how they will react. We also had this when we had this conflict with Russia. We as producers, we felt this strategic blockade of our products, the instrument of a state. Which sort of to give pain, who has a policy which is not according to our best interest. So the small producers are harmed because the huge interest not related to agriculture put pressure on them. This is first conclusion, and we have to be prepared for bigger shocks because the globalization will be broken down. There will be a regionalization of market, and this can be also pretty costly for the producer, for the agriculture producers in Poland who want to invest in production. And you really have to think well about that. According to me, we will also need the help of the Polish government in order to navigate and forecast the state policy in this respect. As I've also mentioned, the revolution related to the digital technology in a large respect will impact the correlation between the Polish and French agriculture, or Polish or any other country's agriculture. But, but the traditional countries from the Western Europe will want to defend their agriculture, which we also know from the past. As I said, there are only questions related both to the geopolitics but also to digital revolution that is taking place right now. So let's assume now that the change of paradigm, of the world paradigm, will take place. The Americans will stop be the hegemon who sets the rules for everybody, and the world will get divided. Let's now imagine that you can feel that also that the industrial agricultural production will be the victim of that change, because in order that the productivity of this production requires gas, oil, for fertilizer, pesticides, etc. And here you will have disruptions in supply chains. Not everybody produces gas and oil. There will be no possibility of easy access to resources, so it will not be easy to foresee and make business plans for the future for the big producers. This will also generate change. Maybe, quite possibly, this is also a question to the specialists. There's a bigger chance for small scale agriculture, which is independent from big outside elements, and will be able to compensate the losses in other markets. So shorter value chains, spurring regional demand is also a certain answer which will give you resilience to geopolitical shocks related to the global deal transformation or the global deal breakdown. Regardless of how high-flying this sounds, but the global deal and the global system impacts us all. And it's good to sit with our decision makers and talk to them to make a certain simulations of such scenarios, and to think in which direction the Polish agriculture should be developed, and to strengthen the demand for agriculture which has a short value chain, short supply chain. Sorry. And looking at today's meeting, it could be ecological and gets a bigger demand at the same time. Riding the modernity. Yes, as I said, I need to be general because I'm talking to the people who really produce, and I have to say that the digital revolution really works well with agriculture and the short supply chains. Let me now give you an example from a different industry, but it might be a good prognosis, a good forecast for you. Ladies and gentlemen, 500 years ago, I'm looking at you. Let's say 500 years ago, you're producing grain in Lublin, and I'm a Dutch merchant, right? I don't trust you, because why should I trust you? But there are agents who, for money, give you a certain guarantee. There's a whole system of dependence, the producer, between the producer and the consumer, and there's plenty of agents on the way. This model generated a whole chain of intermediaries. Until today, you have a whole chain of intermediaries who live off this agriculture. I was also told that the current industrial agriculture generates margins mainly for intermediaries who has generated the whole system for setting parameters for agriculture production. It was the same for 500 years with almost all products for almost whole products with all the intermediaries who put on margins, who create products, so this, who put on packages, etc. It relates to all sorts of production. And this is how it functioned, regardless of, it was because people do not trust each other. However, at the moment when we have a digital revolution called fintech, ladies and gentlemen, how many people go to the sea, to a B&B, asking their friend for what they think about it? But nobody does that anymore. I mean, because we go on Booking.com or some other website, because the digital revolution shortens the chain through auto verification, and of course this could also be distorted, right? But thanks to more and more data, you can get an effect thanks to the digital revolution with circumventing that needless margin or profit taking through for intermediaries. I don't want to go into demagoguery here, but we can say here that digital revolution supports at the source the producer, if only he can be able to master his access to his consumer in a modern way. For me, in my view, it's a very important thing which you have to understand. This is observable also in other situations all around the world. You know that fintechs in the world are the biggest global giants. If you look at the New York Stock Exchange, you can see that all the blue chips are fintechs, the highest capitalization, etc. Why not use that in the agricultural production and not get supported by that, getting back the sort of self-governance, so to speak? So, in my view, the digital revolution, resulting also from this disruption of breaking the value chains, which sort of weakens biggest intermediaries, can support ecological production, agricultural production, which is sustainable and has a shorter and shorter supply chain. From what I understand, I'm not a specialist, as I said, it also supports the structure of Polish agriculture relatively to the American producers or Australian producers, etc., etc., and especially and also in the Western Europe. These are this is my description of how the situation can go when you ask yourself questions. At the end, as my American friends say, which we do not see the Polish agriculture, of course, but they believe that there will be huge problems with agriculture in the world, and who manages the supply chains and access to margin, they will rule. They think that Australia and United States will rule the world because they have the best production basis. They have the best climate. The New Zealand is quite okay too. However, everybody else will be endangered. That all these changes that we're talking about, there will be a big shock tensions for agriculture. I was always wondering how Poland will find its way around this, and this is the last question with which I would like to end my lecture with. I would like to thank you for your attention. It was very nice to talk to you.